Hello, everybody. This is Dave Middlebrook with the Church Lawyers, and I'm really excited about the podcast, the video cast that we're going to be doing today with my good friend, Jim Tomberlin, a great friend of our law firm. Most of you know him, I'm sure, by reading his book that he wrote with Warren Bird, Better Together. It's all about making church mergers work. Good afternoon, Jim.
It's great to be with you, Dave, my good friend. I'm so looking forward to this conversation with you.
Well, you know, Jim, you were at the forefront, you and Warren were at the forefront, I believe, at documenting and helping everybody understand this phenomena of church mergers. And I just wanted to ask you, where do you think we are at this stage? I mean, is it continuing to be a vibrant process in the church world?
What we've seen in the last 10 years, that this has gone beyond just the multi-site church movement. We're seeing a lot of churches, an explosion of churches that are using or seeing mergers as a church planting strategy, as a pastoral succession strategy, as a pastor search strategy, as a community transformation strategy. And many denominations are discovering that this is a revitalization and replant strategy that they can begin to utilize for their own denominations and networks. And so these are all the factors that are contributing to the growing increase of church mergers. And not only that, they here a decade later, we've seen a seismic cultural shift in church attendance and changing attitudes towards local churches.
In over the last decade or so, and you're being so intimately involved in this phenomena, what are some of the big mistakes that you've seen?
Three kind of mistakes that jump out at me in terms of mergers. One, first of all, using partnership language when you talk about mergers. When two churches are talking, we're talking partnership, or like a marriage. Church mergers are not a partnership. They're not two co-equals coming together. There's always one that leads and another that follows, and they can be very similar in size and health. But when you use partnership language, it communicates equality, and church mergers are not two equals coming together. Secondly, having a lack of congregational ownership when they're taking a church through the process of making a decision about joining another church. What I mean by that is that not allowing a congregational conversation to occur while the leadership are having these conversations about joining another church, and not giving the congregation an opportunity to either vote on it for final approval, or at least if a vote is not required by their bylaws, still giving the congregation an opportunity to affirm the decision of the church leadership.
One of the things, and I'm so glad to hear you say that, because we're going to talk in a moment about the legal technicality aspect of this, but we always tell our clients, irrespective of what the legalities are, you have stakeholders, people that are invested, people that they come and they this is their church, and now you're going to do something different in a merger. And at the end of the day, we legally get it correct, but the stakeholders, the people that come to this church, don't come anymore. What's the point?
Well, I say the third mistake that we've seen churches make, and this is not when there's when there's a facility that's being transferred and going to be used by the lead church. The mistake of not taking a 1 to 3 month break or hiatus of meeting in that location, asking all of that joining congregation to attend the other church that they're becoming a part of now for at least 1 month, ideally 3 months, while they do renovations and upgrades and rebranding at that location, but even more importantly, so that they can become more integrated into the life-giving DNA of that lead church, and then relaunch back, rebirth back together as a united body, restarting again together.
Now, I understand you've recently gone through a merger.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about that. You're the founder of Multisite Solutions, and you've recently merged with the Unstuck Group. So have you drawn on your experience here and making sure this works? Tell us about that.
Well, yes, I started Multisite Solutions to help churches with multi-campus solutions, whether it's through multi-site, through mergers, through multiplication strategies. 13 years later, that was still booming, but one of my strategic partners, like the Church Lawyers, was the Unstuck Group, Tony Morgan's Unstuck Group. We were very complementary, and we served the church in different ways, in complementary ways. And so, but he invited me to consider joining them about 5 years ago. And so that conversation began. Last year, I said, I'm ready to do that now.
And so, how can attorneys like us be helpful, and how do you see that as part of the mix?
They're often surprised, oh, I guess we need an attorney, don't we? When I recommend you need to, who's your lawyer?
Right.
And do you have a lawyer? And because there's a legal aspect to this that we want to be sure we do it all appropriately.
And this struck me the other day. I was watching a movie, a British movie, and it showed the Queen opening up some documents that had been sent over from Parliament or the Prime Minister or whatever, and she was unsealing the documents, which were covered in red tape. And it dawned on me that's where this term comes from. It's kind of a put down here with all this red tape and complexity. And I said, actually, when there's red tape involved, it's time to stop and think about it's the the importance of the transaction, and how it's a time to stop and really reflect and make sure you get it done right. And I think that's one of the things that we work really hard to do when we're working with you and other churches that are merging, is to start with the end in mind and go through the documents, make sure everything's done so that at the end of the day, they can have peace of mind.
And I think one of the big shocks is when I'm consulting churches is when I say to them, in a merger, one of the two legal entities is dissolved legally.
Well, yeah, and that's a hard thing to hear sometimes. Yeah, and that also triggers legal issues. And one thing we tell clients is gather the documents, the articles, the bylaws, all those things. Why they call them bylaws, Jim?
Why?
They're called the bylaws because those are the laws by which you have to do things. Go look at the articles of incorporation, which are on file with the Secretary of State and wherever this entity may have been founded, because those articles of incorporation actually trump the bylaws. So if for whatever reason over the years the bylaws got changed, whatever the articles say filed with the Secretary of State, that is the final authority as to how this has to get done. But the point is, you want to do it according to your documents. And as you mentioned earlier, sometimes it requires a vote, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes all these things. But technically, if you get it done right, then you can have peace of mind and start this new chapter. Hopefully, the most successful and vibrant chapter in the life of this new body of believers.
How do you serve my clients?
Well, first of all, we start and try to gain an understanding after you guys have counseled with them, again, with the end in mind. Where are we trying to end up? Who are the parties here? What's the dance going to be looking like? And who's going to lead in the dance? Who's going to follow? And at the end of the day, just lay out a roadmap to say, okay, the leading church needs to get their documents. Let us look at those. The following church, we need to get all this in place so we can execute and lay out the dance steps, so to speak, so that at the end of the day, it's complete and everybody can be happily moving on.
There's a lot of lawyers. Everybody has lawyers in their churches and in their communities, and maybe even some who are familiar with mergers, but church mergers is not the same as business mergers, is it?
That's correct. Well, and one big distinction is in the business world, the term gets M&A, mergers and acquisitions, M&A. Well, in the nonprofit world, there's no shareholders. So there's all the rules that we've been discussing, but the one thing we've not discussed is, well, what is the right of the shareholders? Well, there isn't any shareholder because that church doesn't belong to anybody. Where are we now? What are you guys thinking in terms of your next steps to help churches that are considering the merger process?
Well, I appreciate you asking that, Dave, because we, Warren Bird and I, in conjunction with Leadership Network and the Unstuck Group, and with you as well, and a whole bunch of other organizations, we are sending out another church merger survey for 2019 because we've seen so much happen since the last survey 10 years ago. So we want to get another snapshot of what's happening there, because we think, and we're seeing that the church merger option now is changing the church landscape across the nation. And so this is an important development in the church, and we want to get the latest and greatest data. And so beginning September 5th, we'll be sending out that survey to all across the body of Christ, and you're helping us with that. Actually, there's going to be on the lower third of this screen a link, as well as embedded in the, a link accompanying this video email blast. And there's some incentives, some things to give away that if you take the survey, et cetera. But please take our survey. If you've had a church merger, good or bad, or you're thinking about it, or you're in the middle of a conversation, all those scenarios would be very useful to us on our survey.
Well, that's fantastic. And I would encourage everybody that's watching, please participate in this. This is the only way that we can collectively, as a body of Christ, understand what's going on out there and serve people in the best possible way. And so I appreciate you guys doing that. And I appreciate you joining me today for this important video.